one of the reasons it feels like a disruption, a major disruption, is usually because the individual has tied their job to their identity.
Guilty as charged.
When you meet somebody in a corporate environment and you ask them who they are or ask them for their name or who are you, they automatically tie it to the title. This is the title, but it's everything underneath that title that makes that title what it actually is. And everything underneath that title is you.
I'm Garrick Francis. This is the Inheritance to Income podcast, where we help families, leaders, and founders prepare people and systems, not just assets, for what comes next. I'm your legacy advocate. Let's talk about it. Today, we're into our What Comes After Success series. And I'm honored today to be joined by Janice Coleman. She's a career and leadership strategist. She is a speaker, a coach, so many things that we'll get into. But clearly, she is in a position to help people make a strong comeback. And so welcome to Inheritance to Income, and I look forward to our conversation.
Hey, Garrett, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it as well.
That's great. Well, let's get started. So, Janice, you help people through career disruption and reinvention. And before we get to the exact tools people need to be in, maybe the mindset they're in, I want to ask you about success. When did you feel like you had actually achieved success in your own work?
I believe that the first thing that happened to me was some 30 plus years ago when I was introduced to Zig Ziglar. And I had never heard merged the Bible with actual professional development and success. And because that he was a Christian and he was unapologetically about that. And through the learnings that I got from him, along with other dynamic Christian speakers, pastors, and also those professional development individuals, I learned that success is doing what you've been designed to do and doing it well.
Doing what you've been designed to do and doing it well.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'll give you the example because I think that everybody can relate to this. We all have seen a doorstop, correct?
Right.
And we know that a doorstop is intended to keep a door open. If it's doing it right.
Right.
Yet, there are other things that have held doors open. People, trash cans, rocks, chairs, all types of things that people will use to keep a door open. But the only thing that is really designed to keep a door open is a doorstop. There's no excess material. It's shaped perfectly. It fits snugly. It doesn't obstruct anybody walking past. It does exactly what it's designed to do. And when we find our space where our genius is, we fit exactly in that space, and that's when the brilliance happens.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inheritance to Income, where we help families, founders, and leaders prepare for what's next. Hit that like and subscribe button and share this with a family member or colleague who you think it would help. That'll help this message travel because inheritance has to come with instructions. Now let's get back in. Wow. That's a great perspective. Let me ask you a question though about that one. So you say a doorstop is designed to do exactly what it's purposed to do. What if you're that doorstop, and so now you've been doing that, you've been holding that door open for a long time, and now you want to do something else, and so you want to be repurposed, or you want to grow your purpose. And I'll give it to you this way and let you react. So I was looking around. I'm a golfer. I'm an avid golfer, fortunately or unfortunately. And so I had a certain problem about lifting my leg. And the only thing I found helped was if I put a door wedge, a doorstop under my foot, it could, somebody suggested it could help me. So all of a sudden, this doorstop now had a new purpose. So when you think about people, if you've been doing this one thing for a long time, you've gotten really good at it. How do you think about repurposing?
I think repurposing is important, especially for humankind, because we are the only ones that grow and develop and expand. Animals and plants and all of those things pretty much stay where they have been designed to stay. However, because we are creative and we are dynamic and we engage with each other, we do find those opportunities of innovation and renewal. And I think that we're the only beings on this planet that can really do that. So I believe that being repurposed as a human or as an individual is very important, because if we're not growing, then we're going to become stagnant. And then if we are stagnant, then we might find ourselves not being of much use to anybody other than maybe the couch and the TV, right?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So when we talking about this conversation, about, you were talking about finding your purpose, and I spoke about repurposing. So keep going with that. So you were talking about finding that purpose and that level of success.
Well, repurposing, I'll give you a little bit of my personal background.
That'd be great.
My first real professional job was in information technology. What now they would call a software engineer. Back in the day, we called it a programmer. Now you're a software engineer. It's a little bit more fancy, but you do the same thing. You take data, you make data do what it's supposed to do based on the requirements of your clients and the company, right? So for 12 years, I was in that space. And I actually, midway of that, got the opportunity to actually complete my bachelor's degree. So for 6 years, I was expanding, growing, elevating in a space where there were a lot of people who had master's degrees, and I was sitting at the table with colleagues who were not quite happy to find out that I didn't have even a bachelor's degree and we were making the same amount of money.
That's your own hidden figure story.
Exactly. Their money was being spent on student loans and my money was going to the bank. So halfway through that career, I achieved my bachelor's degree. And 6 years later, there was this call inside of me. We're talking about repurposing. There was this call inside of me to go beyond just working in the context of a corporate environment, but starting to help people beyond and further down the road, really impacting humanity with the opportunity to teach and help and to support and cheer on others as they grew in their careers.
Wow, wow, that's great. And so when you did that, when you moved into that calling and you achieved that level of success, how did it make you feel?
Oh, it made me feel excited and it made me feel scared. And it was excitement because it was like breaking free. However, it was a little intimidating because now I'm free, and what am I doing? Because I'm charting new courses, I'm charting new territory. I'm out there, I'm a little girl from North Philadelphia. So now I'm out here
Fully
on
in the
big
house.
stages. Philly in the house, right? I'm out there on big stages. I had one program that I did was actually at the National Constitution Center in Center City, Philadelphia. My
Right,
company having this huge program in an auditorium that when I was growing up didn't even exist.
right,
And
right.
we had the opportunity to do that. So it was a little scary, but because I had faith that as I walked, the territory that was going to be mine would have to relent to my presence. And so that's why the fear was not a fear of being frightened, but it was the fear and the reverence that I had for God and what He was getting ready to do in my life.
So let me get this straight. You were scared and you had faith at the same time.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit more about that.
Talk about that. Well, being scared is when we look at our own capabilities and our own capacity. But fear overrides that. Fear of God and faith
All right.
overrides being scared in your own humanness, because all things are possible when you believe God. And so, I know that we're talking more corporate, but everywhere I go, I bring the kingdom. So I hope
Right.
you don't mind that.
Right.
I bring the
Right.
kingdom.
No, no, no. That's what we want.
I've stood on stages with CEOs and have never been taken down because I bring the kingdom of who God is with me everywhere I go and everywhere I speak.
So being authentic to yourself is a central tenet to being able to live on purpose.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's not about, I have this challenge with the phrase, the word, and the idea of what people call transparency. And
Right. Let me
transparency,
write. Let me write this down. I'm encouraging people to write it down. All right. Transparent. All
I
right,
and,
y'all
and
write
I
this
s-
down.
and I say that because transparency doesn't have to be put all your stuff out there,
Right.
because sometimes that may not work in your favor. Because I've heard this, and you've probably heard this before as well. People can handle your glory, but they may not be able to
Not
handle your story.
your story. There we go. There we go. But don't you think it's important that they know your story in a way? Because here's what I'm asking. One of the things that I have been concerned about with the generation that's just coming up, and our children, we're in a similar generation, is that we often share our glory with them. They see the glory, but they don't necessarily know the struggles and the story that it took for us to get there. So do they know the kind of work they're going to have to put in?
I think you're actually right. There is a level of sharing that I think has to be managed within a certain context. Because if they don't have context, they can take that little piece of your story and go haywire. So it has to be within a proper context. If I'm going to share something, and I'll give you an example, this was too funny. My youngest son was driving me to meet up with one of my sorority sisters because we were going on a anniversary vacation, 5 of us going away to the DR. So he was driving me to her house because I was going to stay overnight with her, and then we were going to go to the airport together. So we're riding in the car and we're talking about different things, and I'm in the passenger seat, and this happens to be one of my children who drives safely. So I was
I,
fine.
I feel you there.
So I was fine, and we're driving in a car. And I forget what we were talking about, but I responded to him with regard to the comment, with regard to what we were talking about, and I think it had to do with maybe transparency or something along those lines, and talking openly. And I said to him, "Yeah, well, some people operate straight, no chaser." And he
Right.
said, "Mom, what do you know about straight, no chaser?" Now here
And
he
and
is, 26 years old.
yeah.
Some things you just don't need to know, sir.
Some things I always like to say, the Bible does say train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are
Oh,
older, they will not depart from it. We were all young ones. I tell my children, we
yes,
were all young ones.
yes. And, and so when he and I had such a big laugh about that, I was like, sir, you know, there's some things that you just don't need to know. But know this, I understand what straight no chaser means. And he just cracked up laughing. So there is, and to tell him the context so that I could give him an understanding, I'd have to give him the expanse of the story.
Right, right, right. Well, I often encourage people in those situations. I always say two things. Inheritance has to come with instructions. Right? If we are going to, the Bible says an inheritance given too hastily, too early is not
Right.
blessed. So we
Right.
have to give instructions with that inheritance, right?
Yes, yes. And I'm going to say you said that. I was listening to one of your podcasts, one of your solo episodes, and I literally, and I am not kidding you, literally wrote that statement down
Oh, good.
because I love that inheritance has to be given with instruction, and how and the fact that we need to set our children up
Mm,
so that they not only get whatever the inheritance is, but that they understand how it became what it is
right.
and the responsibility they have to manage it with
Yes.
purpose.
Yes. Yes.
So I
And the
absolutely
strength
love
and the
when you said
strength and
that.
the strength and the strength they come from. That's the other thing I like to tell is that, you know, the things we overcame, the things that we did and then our parents did and our grandparents did, and not everything well. All of us make huge, huge mistakes, but the things we've done gave us a strength and a resilience to get here. And so yes,
Right.
you're being handed a responsibility, but you're also being handed the tools to know you have the strength to move forward with it.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
And
right.
that's where the understanding and the idea of performance gap comes in,
Mm,
and the disappointment gap comes in, because if we don't bridge
right.
the understanding of what the inheritance is to the legacy, it will fall through the cracks.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's our responsibility to bridge that gap so that they can perform the way they need to sustain the inheritance, to really build the legacy for generations to come.
You hit on some of the words there that a friend of mine, Shakisha Morgan, who's the legacy counselor, was on our show, and she says that legacy and inheritance is building and bridging.
Mm,
That if you build it without bridging, what's it for?
right,
Yeah.
right. And we see that with the history of the Vanderbilts and what's the other family?
Yeah. The Rothschilds, the
The
Vanderbilts,
Rothschilds, the
yeah.
Vanderbilts. Yeah, because I believe it was the Vanderbilts who only had what, maybe
Mhm.
two generations
Right.
that sustained,
And the
but
Rockefellers,
then
you
the
hear these names.
Rockefellers, but the Rockefellers have sustained it over multiple generations because of, I believe, the way they were able to bridge those gaps so that as the generations continued, that money did not dissipate.
So you talked about some of these gaps, and I like to talk about some of those too. So I'm gonna bridge us back over to where we both have some experience in the corporate world and what some
Hmm.
people are now looking at. And so as we look at people who are getting in the later stages of their career, and they have been in the corporate world, they've been doing something for a long time, and so maybe now they're just on the outside, they're starting to think about what comes next. Or in this
Hmm.
economy, we see, as was my case, people getting pushed out a few years before they were ready to take that next step. And I know you worked with people in the corporate world on your book, How to Come Back from a Disruption. And so if we're having these disruptive things in our lives, or we're noticing these gaps in our lives, we may have a loss gap when someone, a spouse or a partner or a parent passes away, or a relational gap. But we have these gaps in our lives that trigger and expose a disruption.
Hmm.
Talk to me a little bit about how do you start to think about helping people in a professional sense through these disruptions?
The best time to talk to people about how to balance those disruptions is very early on in their career, before the disruptions actually start to happen. But if we can't catch them then, one of the things that's so important for people to understand is understanding their identity. Because one of the reasons it feels like a disruption, a major disruption, is usually because the individual has tied their job to their identity.
Wow. Tied the job. Okay. Guilty as charged. Guilty as charged. So convicted and guilty, having been through that. But let's go a little bit more into that. So when people,
Mhm.
what do you see when people do that? How are they intertwining their identity and their responsibility on a day-to-day basis?
Repeat that for me.
How are they? How do you see that? How do you see that come to fruition when their identity is being tied into their into that job or that what they were doing?
Well, when you meet somebody in a corporate environment and you ask them who they are, or ask them for their name, or
Mm,
or who are you? I'm a senior accountant.
right.
I am. They automatically, it's I am, and they tie it to that
Title.
activity,
Yeah.
that title. Exactly. They tie it to the
Mhm.
title, I am. And whatever comes behind that is where they are resting their particular identity. So when I'm talking with somebody, and I have a lot of people who, they're hurt because they've lost that job, 30 years
Right.
doing whatever the case may be. Some people, not so many years, which is good, but when you're hitting 20, 25, 30 years, you're invested.
Very much so.
You're invested and you're vested, both. You're
Yeah.
invested and you're vested, right? So when I'm working with people, I just want them to start to unfold or peel back the onion with regard to, this is the title, but it's everything underneath that title that makes that title what it actually is.
Mm,
And everything underneath that title is you.
right. Right.
So now
The
you're going to
title. So
take that. Go
yeah,
ahead,
that's
I'm
pretty
sorry.
amazing. That's pretty amazing. The way what I hear you say is that the title, the company owns the title, but you are the package underneath. You're the substance of that title.
Exactly. Exactly. Even when they seek to write a job description for that particular role, they're going to look at what you, Garrett, has done in that role in order to
Mm,
determine what's needed for somebody else to come in and perform it.
right.
So the role is actually you. You are the value. And you're not a commodity. You're an individual who brings certain capacity to that role. And when you're gone, even though the title is there, they
Mm,
still have to get somebody who's going to come in and act and walk and talk and be just like you. Otherwise, nobody's going to be satisfied because they're used to you being in that space.
wow. There's a real lesson in that the, the role doesn't define you. You define the role.
Yes,
And I think there's a lesson there for people who are in a role whose identity is tied to it, and there's a lesson there for people who are looking to step into a new role.
right. Yeah. Because realize that And I believe that you said some of these same things in the episodes that I've watched of this podcast before. When you leave, who's going to fill the life of those relationships?
Right.
Who's going to understand that customer? Who's going to know about the situation that happened 5 years ago, the reason why we now have this program and what this program is utilized to really serve? They see it as a program, but they don't understand the life force behind it and why it actually exists if they don't know the history.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you walk out the door, you're taking the history.
One thing I learned when I was in corporate America, Janice, along that line was that, and it was a hard lesson, was that if you don't train your replacement, you can never leave.
Exactly. Or you think you can never leave.
You and the people around you
Right.
think you
Well,
can
see,
never leave.
and I agree with you, and that's therein is where good leadership shows up. When I walked into my last full-time IT role, my first day, I come into a situation where it's helter-skelter. Like, what is going on? This is not what I put in for, right? Because there was a system that went down overnight, and the person who owned the system
Those are words.
just happened to have an emergency appendectomy the same night. So the system is down. Nobody on the team knows how to do anything with that system because the person who owns it did not have any documentation. And do you know what we had to do? We took a computer, literally, not a laptop, not a telephone, not a tablet, a literal computer to his hospital room, put it up on his stomach, and asked him to fix it. And this was my team. Garrett, I was scared out of my mind because I had come from a company that had full documentation to the point of where they could tell you the point of entry for any piece of data that we had in our system.
Right.
So I wasn't used to that. So as a leader, when you don't have full documentation, and in this instance, full transparency about what systems do, you, the leader, are at a disadvantage, the company is at a disadvantage, and the team is being held hostage.
Yeah. 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 And it's so funny. In that moment, I'm sure the person and even the team was looking at the person like, oh, they're irreplaceable. And it was like, they're irreplaceable. But afterwards, how did you look at irreplaceable?
Exactly. And you know what I did? Because I had come from a company that was documentation heavy, and I used to think it was crazy. All of everything we did was documented. I thought it was crazy until I had this experience. And the first thing I did was start having team meetings where everybody on the team got the opportunity to share the systems that they owned. And they got the opportunity to prepare just a little information sheet so that all of us would know exactly what they did.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. So if we think about that, if we fast forward, someone's in their career and they have put the systems in place and they've had this level of success like we talk about. And so how did you think once you had achieved all that success and put those things in place, how did you then make that decision that, your job in that instance was well done? Your job was done. and that it was time to move on to that next purpose?
I think that you know that it's done and you're ready when when you feel like what's really next. What's really next, right? And early on in my career, I had the opportunity to go into in my IT career, I had an opportunity to go into supervisory role, team leader role, and those types of things which would have been more money and definitely more prestige. But there was something inside of me that said, I don't know enough of the foundation of this industry to feel safe moving over just yet.
Right.
And so I sought more information, I sought more training, I sought to learn other technologies because I just didn't feel I was ready, which may seem like, you're playing small, it's kind of like false humility. However, I guess somewhere inside of me that early on Janice Coleman, who would end up being in the space I'm in right now with you, I realized that there are levels. And if you don't finish the first level, a foundation of a house,
Right.
you got to build that foundation. You got to ready the ground, pour the foundation, and then do what?
That's right.
Wait.
You have to wait. It has to cure. It has to set. Yeah.
Before you build on it.
Right.
Otherwise, once you build on it, if it's not fully cured, once you build on it, you have the opportunity for a foundation fault.
Cracks, falters, uneven, all those things.
All those things. And so I feel like a person really will know when they're ready, when they are at peace where they are, but they're not satisfied that this is all there is.
So you say they'll know. They'll know that. Does everybody know what's next? They know they're at peace. You say that. You know that they've established a solid foundation. How do they know what's next?
They may not. But this is where the genius of being a human with curiosity comes in. Because we really can understand that there is something behind curtain number 1, curtain number 2, curtain number 3.
And if
I'm
y'all
taking
know
y'all
that,
back a little bit.
if y'all know that reference, you're definitely in the demo.
Yeah, Google it,
That's
right?
right. That's right.
Google that. But they have that feeling. And I believe, and I know that we've heard this a million times, once the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Once the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Keep explaining that.
Because situations will start to come along, opportunities will start to make themselves known. You will find yourself in a place where you feel like you can do it, but you're not ready to do it. There's going to be somebody or something that's going to be there to help you bridge. It's just like when children, I'm thinking about my granddaughter. When children grow up, they go various stages. And even though when they're crawling and they begin to walk, they might fall. They're not learning to fall, they're learning to walk. And eventually, and that's when we talk about the learning competency continuum, right? The conscious competence, unconscious competence, conscious incompetence, right? So when you're going through those stages, you know when you're ready. The child knows when they're ready. They don't necessarily cognitively know, but their body is showing that it is time to walk.
Right.
And you know, as soon as they learn to walk, what do they do next? Run.
Learn to run. Learn to run. But in this situation, how are we helping them? Because again, you get in that situation where you know that it's time to walk, but you're still a little shaky. And in an elder sense, you know it's time. Your time in that job or that career is coming to an end, or you can even sense that I'm in Washington D.C. and the folks in government could sense what was coming. Nobody had to
Mm-hmm.
say it. They knew that this
Mm-hmm.
disruption was coming, or that their time was coming to an end. But how do we help those people? I know, like, I'll give you this example. Like your granddaughter, she's beautiful, by the way.
Thank.
I know that your daughter and you and the family have affirmations for her that she does, and so
Mm-hmm.
you're pouring into and preparing her to know when those steps are to be taken. So come with me to those on the other end of the spectrum who are kind of ending their career. What types of things do we need to be able to do, or people around them, or even people who are helping them or coaching them? What do they need to be able to do to help people recognize when they're ready?
Take them through certain stages and help them to be aware. Because if they are not aware, they'll never be they'll never be really ready to move forward. And even if they have to move forward, they'll always be looking back if they don't become aware. Um, a mentor of mine used to say, "A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still."
A man can say that again. A man
A man convinced
convinced.
against his will is of the same opinion still.
Hmm.
So if somebody does not become aware, and I don't know how to introduce awareness except exposure. So once they become aware, then you can begin to help them to see possibilities. But it's that awareness piece that's kind of I think it's unique to everybody.
Right.
And if we don't become aware, but we're forced to move, we'll constantly be looking back.
Right.
And I see that all of the time with some of the clients that I have worked with in the past, who even though they're moving on to a new opportunity, it's always better in Egypt,
Right. Right.
right? It's always what we used to do, and they never really settle because that awareness is kind of, lagging. The awareness is not going to come until they're 3 or 4 years in
Right.
to the new opportunity. So a person like myself who may be coaching them, one of the things that we do well, I think, in the coaching in industry is be a cheerleader and help people to really get high on themselves. Maybe sometimes to a fault, but we help them get high on themselves because they have to break free. They have to gain that awareness in order to break free to now be in the new space where they are and thrive.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, because I think one of the things that I hear in that is that people always say, I'm only comparing me to me. But sometimes comparing me to old me is not necessarily healthy.
That very well may be true because that can keep us in the past. Sometimes you just have to, I would say, draw a line in the sand
Mm.
and step over that line because your rear view mirror is this big,
Right.
but your window shield is this No, you can't even see my hands.
That's
Your
right. That's
window
right.
shield is this big.
You can't even see the whole frame.
You can't even see it because this is only for your reference, right?
That's good.
But this
That's
is
good.
for your direction.
Right.
This is just so you don't what's behind you. Unless you see a speeding vehicle, I mean, or and you can see it speeding,
Right.
that's looking a little fast. I might need to move out the way. But this right here just informs you. If you're backing up, yes, you need to have it so that you can have a perspective of what not to hit. But when you're moving forward, this doesn't participate
Point of
in your
reference.
forward motion.
Just a point of reference. I like that. I like that. So for people who are thinking about, I had an episode I talked about where retirement is the ultimate entrepreneurship, right? And what I like to say is that for the first time in a lot of people's lives, um, they are no longer within a structure. They don't have a schedule
Mm,
they have to keep. They have their largest networks that they've ever had. They have the most relationships they've ever had. They have, if they've done well enough, they have some access to capital and know where to go get it. I mean, all things that an entrepreneur craves.
right.
And so now people are stepping out. And again, I don't like the word retirement because it means withdrawal. So I like to use redeployment. And so if now they're ready to redeploy into this new life, why do so many people struggle with making that transition?
I
Why do you
think it
think?
has a lot to do with structure. You
Mm,
mentioned it. They don't have nobody tell them what to do. Get up when I feel like getting up, the whole 9 yards. Yeah, that's fine for like a week,
mm,
maybe two. If you go on
yeah,
a vacation, maybe three.
yeah.
But to live a life without structure, I think, is a recipe for wandering.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
To live a life without structure, even though your structure may be different, I believe that people are creatures of habit. And building a structure that bridges you from the regiment of the 9 to 5 to a more open regiment, I still believe you have to have structure and you have to have purpose and you have to have something that pulls you forward. Otherwise, retirement is it. And you know what happens to ships that go into retirement.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. They are. I always talk about how I literally think people who have so much wisdom inside of them and knowledge and information literally implode our health and our mental and our spiritual because we
Right,
don't have we don't have a place to deploy it. We don't have a structure and a plan.
right,
Wisdom should never go to the grave.
right. And I agree with you after we had our conversation about
Yeah,
that. I agree
yeah,
with you.
yeah, yeah.
I
It's
do
pretty
agree with
amazing.
you.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of Inheritance to Income. A lot of people have built something meaningful: a business, a career, a family responsibility, a body of wisdom, but they're not clear what it should make possible. That's what I call the legacy deployment gap. At Francis Legacy Bridge Partners, we help you name the gap, clarify what needs attention, and identify the right next step before transition becomes urgent. To explore a legacy deployment gap call, visit francislbp.com. The link is in the show notes below. You built it. Now let's clarify what comes next. Now let's get back to the conversation. So
Yeah.
let me say it's a wonderful conversation. I know we've talked about success and about disruption. I know your book, Layoff to Landing. That's correct. That's the way. And it's how can people who have those major disruptions, whether it's a layoff or a loss in their life or something that happens, take these things you've said about awareness and about all these other things. What are some of the actual steps that you would say if somebody's facing that type of disruption? What are the first two or three things you as their advisor would say do?
Well, when I'm talking to people, sometimes I don't get to them immediately after the thing happens, so I can't say what to do immediately because
Mm-hmm.
they've already done. They're venting on social media. They've already,
Hey,
all of,
yeah, yeah. If you don't do that. Don't
don't
make
do
that your
that.
first.
Do not do that.
That's not your first option. No.
Right. It's not. But people are hurt and they go through those stages of grief
Mm-hmm.
and people are hurt. And I would say the first thing to do is to not take it personally, but take it personally.
Mm.
Whatever that transition is working for you. Even though we may not see it right now, it is working for us. It's not happening to us, but it's happening for us to make us or to allow us the opportunity to be a new person, a different person, or try our wings out on something that we may have never tried
Wow. Yeah.
if this had not happened. And I have story after story. One person I worked with who was having a huge challenge in her employment history. And she's a learned woman with a PhD, a really nice person, but just found herself in situations that were not beneficial to her at all. And we went through my whole, when I was in the career management, roll up your sleeves, stilettos on the ground. We were in that mode together for approximately 4 months. And she always had a heart for starting her own business, but she never thought that she could do it. And so here comes Janice, the cheerleader. Like,
There
try
you
it
go.
out. Even if you are going to move toward a full-time role, look at what you would have to do to start this business. And so eventually she decided to start a cookie business. And she is thriving in her
Wow.
cookie business. Auntie's Cookies in Trenton, New Jersey. Auntie's Cookies.
Next time I'm visiting family in Philly, I'm gonna have to hop over to Trenton.
Absolutely. And, but would that have ever materialized
Wow.
if she had that easygoing, status quo job, no stress, go in, do your thing, go home, never have an issue ever? It would not have disrupted her, it would not have agitated her enough to actually move forward to a thriving. I'm not talking about cookies in a bag and go home. I'm talking about big sheets of cookies. I'm talking about a big operation. I'm talking about doing her thing. But it would have never happened if she did not have that agitation. It's like the pearl, right?
Yeah.
That oyster minding its business. And just a little bit of sand gets in there for a long enough period of time,
Here you go.
it changes something that's ordinary into something that is extraordinary.
Extraordinary. That's amazing. Well, I hate to draw it even to a close. You and I could keep going. We're gonna have to probably do it again. But I want to kind of draw this. So, one, I want you to tell people where they can find you and what's out there because you have so much wisdom to offer. And then I'll have a closing question for you.
Okay, well, you can find me on all things social media under Janice M. Coleman, and which means LinkedIn, YouTube, and I'm on Facebook and also on Instagram. I do a little bit of TikTok, but not a whole lot. And of course, you can find me at janicecoleman.com. That's where you can get information about my career triage program, which is my signature career program. Then if you have any other questions or information or need information, you can always reach out to me, Janice at janicecoleman.com, and mention Garrett so I'll know exactly where you found me from or where you found me, and can put a preposition at the end of a sentence, Garrett. Every once in a while I slip out, but I try not to.
That's
That's how you can get to me.
That's great. Well, I'm sure hopefully people will see this and reach out. We'll make sure and put all the information in the show notes as well. And so before we close, I'd like to ask you this question. After everything you've been able to do, the people you've helped to land and relaunch, what do you feel called to do?
I believe that my calling is to prepare people to perform. And the thing that I have been able to do, whether it's on a small scale or a large scale, is to incite people to action provoking activities. What's next is oftentimes the question that somebody's going to have once they've finished talking to me. What's next? What should I do with that information that Janice shared with me? Oh, I didn't see it that way. And so preparing people to perform is the underlining call and purpose on my life. Regardless to where you might find me doing it, that's what you're going to find me doing.
Wow. Well, y'all, you've heard it. You want to reach out to Janice Coleman. You want to check with us at Francis Legacy Bridge Partners. We can hook you up. And I think it's been amazing to talk to her, to really think about, to understand that whatever transition you're facing is for you. And that you have to know that you can build and bridge to your own self, into who you're becoming. That you can create the structures no matter the disruption, whether you're disrupting it yourself or whether it's being disrupted in your life. There are ways to make sure you understand that transition is on purpose. That transition is for you, and it's what comes next. So I thank you for joining us on Inheritance to Income. We do not take it for granted. God bless.